Thank you, Karen. Before we go any further, I think it's very important for us to show our support and solidarity for our neighbours in Nottingham following yesterday's tragic events. Our thoughts and prayers are with the loved ones of the families affected and indeed the whole city. So can I ask you all just join me for a minute's silence to remember the 3 sad lives lost? Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to this new administration's first cabinet meeting. Special welcome to those at the back, the Mayor, Mohammed, and the Deputy Youth Mayor. Harman, welcome to the meeting. We have an exciting and ambitious agenda to deliver that the people of Derby have set this administration and that we were all elected on. The whole Cabinet will be absolutely focused on delivering this agenda, working with our senior officers of the Council and indeed all officers of the Council, along with our fantastic partner organisations across the city throughout this first year of our administration and indeed as we're on 4-year cycles. Many of the Cabinet are the first time they've been on Cabinet, so I'm sure are all up for the challenge and will be working with each other and everybody else who's wanting to be involved in this exciting agenda. So we will drive this through. I note the other group leaders are all new into their roles, so welcome to the other group leaders, and I look forward to having good, strong, constructive relationships and engagement from all groups to help our city move forward. We'll get through the business of Cabinet in a orderly and efficient manner, and I can ask everyone who speaks today just to introduce themselves and their job title, so people know who we are. Many, like I said, will be talking. Will be on the Cabinet for the first time. Okay, so moving on through the agenda. Do we have any apologies? No, we don't. We're all here. Brilliant. I've not been informed of any late items. There's no receipt of petitions and no identification of urgent business, which calling will not apply to. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. So, item 6, minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of April 23. A mover for those as a true record. Thank you. Seconder. Me and Chris can do that. Okay. Item 7, recommendations from Executive Scrutiny Board last night. Them recommendations have been circulated. They're available on CMIS, and I'll deal with them at the appropriate item on the agenda. Item 8, minute extract from Council meeting of the 24th of May in relation to the Constitution, some minor tweaks recommended by the Monitoring Officer following the Boundary Commission review that's taken place. The matter was resolved obviously at full council It's here for Cabinet. Anybody wish to speak on this item? There was a recommendation from exec scrutiny yesterday. Councillor Poulter.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This minute obviously refers mainly to the constitutional changes that are necessary, but the Executive Scrutiny Board welcomes or anticipates the opportunity to scrutinise the final constitutional changes that come about from the review, but can go along with the recommendations or the resolutions of full council there. But they chose to make a recommendation in relation to resolution number 4, which is in relation to neighbourhood funding. It was part and parcel of the minute because the recommendation was to resolve the issue around the 2 member wards and to ensure to ensure appropriate funding across the board for each councillor and each ward. The recommendation is that each councillor is effectively allocated £5,000 in devolved funding, and that way £10,000 will go to the 2 member wards and £15,000 go to the 3 member wards. But the Executive Scrutiny Board last night felt that it was such an important issue that they came up with the resolution as printed, in that they endorsed the recommendation and resolved to ask Cabinet to ensure that £5,000 was made available per councillor per annum, and that is across all 18 wards, and that this amount of devolved funding be maintained going forward for all 51 councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. That's absolutely fine. It's what the actual minute extract says, so it's reiterated in the recommendation of exec scrutiny. It was a minute extract from a meeting which was passed unanimously, so I can't see anybody in Cabinet having an issue with that. Like I say, it's actually in the minute. It's written in the minute. So all those in favour of the minute extract from full council at item 8? Yeah, sure, Councillor Peakfield.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the recommendation itself is a little bit woolly. It says maintained going forward. I mean, what does that mean? I'd be hesitant to understand. If it's not very clear, then we can't really actually vote anything and support anything.
Okay, I think I'm not going to open this up to massive debate because it has been through council. The way I read that it's reiterating item 4 that was already resolved at full council. So I think it's pretty clear. Councillor Hazelgrave.
I don't know if it's wise for us to kind of tie in the whole 4-year period of this administration, because we don't know what the economic situation will be down the road. I think it would be wise to do it for this year, but leave it open for how it might be reviewed in the future.
Again, I think the way the minute extract is drafted and the way the recommendation is drafted, it's probably okay to leave it as it is. Each year there's annual budget reviews and that goes through full council anyway. Councillor Hassel.
Thank you, Leader, and welcome you to your place. Yeah, just on that, I think I understand the ramifications of tying it into a 4-year term, but I think for the purposes of this meeting, could we not have it worded as for the remainder of this municipal year?
Thank you, Councillor Hassel. Okay, so let's move to the vote on minute extract from full council agenda item 8. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. So moving on to key decisions at agenda item 9, Derby and Derbyshire Integrated Care Strategy for 2023. Alison Wynne, I think, is going to speak on that first, and then Councillor Martin may come in.
Thank you, Chair, and just by way of introduction, I'm Alison Wynne, Assistant Director of Public Health, and I'm presenting this item on behalf of the Integrated Care Partnership. So I'll just start by just giving a little bit of context in which the strategy sits and a bit of background to it. So just for note, the integrated care strategy covers the whole of Derby and Derbyshire. Its purpose is to set the direction for the local health and care system to deliver more joined-up preventative and person-centred care and to respond to population health need and health inequalities. And it particularly aims to focus on the issues that will benefit from cross-Derbyshire, cross-system consideration and efforts. So very much focused on those. The development of the strategy is the responsibility of the Integrated Care Partnership, and the partnership itself is a statutory partnership and is a joint committee of Derby City Council, Derbyshire County Council and Derby and Derbyshire Integrated Care Board. It's co-chaired by the relevant portfolio holder and Health and Wellbeing Board Chair and is hosted currently by Derby City Council. To note that the strategy has been developed involving colleagues from across partners, which includes Derby City Council, and it has been reviewed and supported by the Integrated Care Partnership in April of this year and recommends to Council that the strategy is approved for publication. The strategy is intended to and does align with the health and wellbeing strategies of both Derby and Derbyshire, and to note that it is underpinned by data and the understanding of the health needs of the population through the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. Also to note that a task and finish group is in place developing a comprehensive evaluation framework which will determine whether the strategy delivers its intentions, considering experience, service and population, outcomes and system integration and effectiveness, and will consider methodology, appropriate methodology and kind of the relevant time scales for the delivery of this. Also to note there's no specific or national funding attached to the Integrated Care Partnership or the Integrated Care Strategy, but is expected to be delivered within existing resources through more collaborative, joined up and targeted action across the system. It's intended that the strategy itself will not be a static document, but will be updated on an ongoing basis in line with kind of how the system moves and develops and along with the strategy implementation itself. Alongside the full strategy, which you'll note is quite a significant document, there will be a shorter, easier read, more accessible version of the strategy which will be published alongside. I obviously won't go through the strategy in any detail, but just to draw attention to Section 5, which is the key areas of focus of the strategy, which focus around start well, particularly on school readiness, stay well, which is focusing on prevention and early intervention of the three main clinical causes of ill health, which are circulatory disease, respiratory disease and cancer, and finally age well and die well, enabling older people to live healthy, independent lives at their normal place of residence for as long as possible. And then finally to note in section 3.3.3 is the focus on the key drivers of premature death, morbidity and health inequalities, which relate to things like smoking, healthy weight, physical activity, etc. And to note that they completely align with the city's health and wellbeing strategy and the existing council plan. I think that's all I wanted to take you through. So just in terms of the recommendations to Cabinet, is the recommendation of the recommendation of the Integrated Care Partnership is accepted and the strategy is approved for publication, and that secondly, that any kind of minor amendments or technical changes required kind of prior to publication are delegated to the Director of Public Health in consultation with the relevant Cabinet member. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Alison. Councillor Poulter, did you want to present the Exec Scrutiny Board's recommendation?
Yes, thank you. In the course of the discussion, Councillor Wright in particular felt that the strategy might lack some elements of evaluation Alison and myself tried to assure her that it is actually the strategy is the responsibility of the ICP, and that evaluation would be ongoing, but he felt it was appropriate to bring it to Cabinet to make a particular mention to evaluate and assess the outcomes of the strategy for ourselves. And as a result, you got this recommendation, which the rest of the board didn't disagree with.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank Alison Wynne for her stewardship of this strategy and of the document. It's been in the making for a year since the Health and Social Care Act. It involves an awful lot of partners, all the councils across the council, as well as the county, as well as the city, and lots of health partners, including both health and wellbeing boards. So it's a very comprehensive document, a very comprehensive, high-level kind of strategy. It has been discussed and presented to various bodies many times, and this is the outcome. So obviously, I do recommend to colleagues that we approve this today. It is worth saying that in order to succeed as a strategy, it does require urgently, I would say, an injection of government funding for it to be delivered effectively. I think that's essential. But the strategy itself, I think, is very commendable. On the recommendation, I think we can say that we do understand the recommendation, but it is important that the strategy is evaluated, not least for the fact of whether there is enough funding to actually deliver the health outcomes as required. However, as indeed Councillor Poulter has acknowledged, in the document, in section 8, there's a whole section on evaluation, and an evaluation framework is in the process of being formulated now, which obviously naturally will look at efficacy and also will look at timescales. And so for that reason, whilst we can note the recommendation and accept that it's an important point to raise, I don't think we need to amend the document in any way, because the ask in the recommendation is already incorporated within the text of the strategy document. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so Cabinet, can I ask you to vote on recommendation 2.1 and 2.2 on item 9? All those in favour? Of the main report. Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Okay, moving on to key decision item 10, the dedicated school grant management plan. Pauline speaking to that first, or John? Councillor Whitby.
Thank you. Yeah, this is extremely important and quite a large piece of work, some of which has been in front of Cabinet previously. But the plan aims to get the DSG into balance by 26-27. I think we're currently 7.4 million overspent, and this is a national issue. I think Derby's position is much less bad than most areas, but still it's still overspent, and without doing anything, of course, it'll just ramp up. And there is always the prospect, it's unlikely to happen, but prospect down the line that we could become liable for this overspend. So it's absolutely right that we get this into order. There are various strands to this, like I said, some of which have already been through Cabinet, which is the creating of extra specialist places at Kingsmead, Ivy House, St Clair's. There is support for schools and well, the public basically to agree the right level, the right number of EHCPs. Derby has more EHCPs than the national profile. It's 4% nationally, 4.7 in Derby. So with the extra advice, we're hoping to sort of manage the front door as well as extra provision, and also we are going to create more provision alongside the mainstream with a sort of a hub and spoke model, which I know my colleague is very keen Councillor Hasselgrave, very keen to have implemented. So all in all, you know, we need to balance the books as responsible authority. The paper has been through Schools Forum, Derby Send Board, and yeah, I'm happy for us to recommend this to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Whitby. Just a question for Pauline. Pauline, I noticed at 4.5 there's a summary of the national picture, and it shows that the national deficit is currently estimated at a staggering £2.5 billion, and that, you know, there has been some government help in other areas, but Derby wasn't even invited to join either of the two programmes available for help. Do we know why that is?
Yes, so there's a lag there in terms of us. We weren't actually showing a deficit budget at that time, so this is quite a slow national process. We are having a conversation with the ESFA and hopefully presenting this plan next Wednesday, and one would hope that they recognise the work that we're doing, and that one of the rewards might be that we you know, that they invite us into one of the plans. So we're very open to it.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I note exec scrutiny resolved to note the report. Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Hasselgrave.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself the first time. Councillor Paul Hasselgrave, Labour and Cooperative Councillor for Abbey, and Member of Cabinet for Equalities, Cost of Living and Customer Inclusion. I hope I'll say less now after I've said all that. Now, I do think that it's a great move to have a lot of the content of this put into practice, particularly all the stuff about the hubs and spokes and having centres of excellence in delivering education for children who have special needs of various kinds. And I'm sure that will lead to better outcomes for those children and better outcomes across the city, not just the ones in the hubs, but the ones in the spokes as well, because they'll get bespoke advice about how to deal with children with particular needs, and maybe that they will manage them better in the classroom and manage their learning as well, and their social development. And I think it's really important that children are part of a mainstream school wherever possible. Disability shouldn't be a barrier to children being in a mainstream school. I think that's essential, so that they mix with their peers and their peers understand what it's like to kind of put themselves in their shoes, and it makes a greater understanding and tolerance for all in that school community.
Thank you, Councillor Hasselgrave. Okay, Cabinet, can you please show your support for recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 of item 10? Thank you very much. That's approved unanimously also. Sorry, Karen. Okay, so moving on to items under budget and policy framework. Item 11, the financial accounts for 22-23 and the outturn reports for the General Fund and the Capital Programme. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the outturn report for 22-23. In terms of the revenue account, the Council's reporting a gross overspend of £13.665 million, and that's been mitigated by two specific reserves, one of 1.2 million for the pay and inflation, and another is 2.265 million, which was from COVID contingencies. That results in a net overspend position of £10.2 million, and that will be funded from the budget risk reserve. Of that overspend, £4.5 million related to pay pressures. That was arising from a pay award which was significantly more than that was budgeted for during the year. Other significant overspends arose in our social care services to the tune of £15.7 million. £3 million of that was in relation to a 6% increase in the numbers of adults accessing our care services, and £7.3 million for children's social care. And although the overspend is in relation, and the overspend in the children's social care isn't around volume, that's in relation to significant costs increasing due to a national shortage of places. You can see from the report that the numbers of looked after children are reducing, and they're reduced by 5% to 624 at the time the report was published, and that is a 5% reduction from 2 years ago. The demand strategies adopted by the council and the current numbers of looked after children of this week are at 601, which is remained the lowest that we've seen for a number of years. The cost of care continue to be a challenge, and just to put that into context, our top 10 children's care packages cost the council just shy of £5 million after contributions from health partners of £3 million. Other significant pressures have materialised where inflationary increases could not be contained. And for example, insurance premiums rose by 9% during the year, fuel overspent by £250,000, and our utility costs in street lighting and leisure alone accounted for a pressure of £750,000. Home to school transport has also overspent by £3 million in relation to the pressures as contained within the previous report considered by Cabinet. There have been underspends to mitigate those pressures, and the council continues to enforce essential spend and recruitment only through the spending panels, which have been in place for a number of about 18 months now. And in terms of the savings, delivery of savings have delivered at 90% of the £13 million target. The capital programme spent £105 million on a revised programme of £150 million, and there have been significant slippage that's been reported throughout the financial year. Major slippage that has been accounted for is in relation to some examples around the Transforming Cities programme, of which £45 million of slippage had been reported previously. Elements within the regeneration programme, £14 million worth of slippage, and £8 million on the schools programme. That's specifically in relation to our SEND strategy. The Treasury Management element of the report reports an underspend on the Treasury Management of £2.4 million, which is a direct correlation to the capital slippage that I've just alluded to. And this is proposing to be transferred to the Treasury Reserve to fund the future borrowing requirements of the capital programme. During Q4, the Council made some additional borrowing of £45 million on a short-term temporary basis to manage the cash flows at the end of the financial year, and that's not unusual activity. In terms of Treasury compliance, all but one of our KPIs complied with our internal Treasury policies. The dedicated schools grant, special educational needs demand continued to be a pressure and has resulted in a DSG pressure in the year of £3.6 million and accumulated DSG deficit of £4.4 million. The housing revenue account outturned with a surplus of just over £200,000 against an original planned shortfall of £2.7 million, and that's a result from an overachievement of income against dwelling rents and a reduction in the planned bad debt provision. Also contained within the report is the approval to write off £273,000 worth of bad debt. The 12 individual cases for consideration are detailed in Appendix 7. So we'll just take you to the recommendations in the report. The report is recommending to note the position for the 22-23 outturn, and they're contained at 2.1. And then at 2.2, there's a series of approvals in relation to movement in use of reserves and the write-off of the sundry debt and residential care. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary, Alison. Just to note, the Exec Scrutiny Board resolved to note the report. And thank you for that summary, Alison. I mean, my view on the accounts for, and in particular the budgets for previous years, isn't going to change just because now I'm sat over here and not over where Councillor Hassell's sat. Austerity has cost this city and this council dearly, and it continues to cost us dearly. It continues to impact our residents. And as the report clearly reports, a gross overspend of 13.6 million and a net overspend of 10.2 after the use of the inflation reserve and the COVID reserve. We must remember at the beginning of the year, 5.3 million was budgeted for from the reserves. So had that 5.3 not been taken from the reserves initially, the total overspend for the last previous year would have been just under £19 million. That's getting on to close to 10% of the budget, between 9 and 10% of the budget. It's a huge number, and it just proves the impact that austerity is still having on our city. So it was never a remarkable budget. It was always a bad budget, and the proof is in the Outturn report. Having said that, we have to work with what we have, and we've got to make sure, as we review the previous year's budget, the city is protected as much as it can be, and we'll do everything we can and in our powers to make sure the message from Derby is heard loud and strongly at central government. We'll continue to fight for Derby and make sure Derby is adequately supported, given the vast number of challenges that we face. Anybody else like to speak on this report? Councillor Hassell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Clearly, previously, you've been very vocal about the use of reserves. I would be interested to know, obviously not in great detail, but are you obviously still committed to that? And have you got any idea how you might avert the use of them in going forward?
Bring Councillor Dinser in a second. Yeah, good question. The last time there was a change of administration, there was a pretty healthy reserve balance, given that we were then 8 years into austerity. The previous cabinet inherited about 36 million, mid-30s anyway. I've got the exact number of reserves. And as you can see from the report in front of you, the general fund reserve is down to 8.9 million reserves. The budget risk reserve is down to 4.9. The prediction for the next 2 years is a hole in the council's finances of 17 million rising to 25 million, if I remember right. So that will completely use up any reserves we can have, or we have, should I say. What would I do differently? I wouldn't be so reliant on reserves in the first place, and if we have to make tough decisions to make sure we're not so reliant on reserves, that's what we'll have to do. I think it's absolutely wrong to rely on reserves when you're setting a budget, wrong then to use reserves throughout the year, and then incompetent to then have to rely on reserves at the end of the year to balance the books. It's a position we have to do because the council, unlike other statutory bodies, has to have a balanced budget. So we'll continue to do everything we can, including lobbying government for a better deal for Derby, and make sure the services that our residents need are adequately funded. Councillor Dinser.
Yeah, I mean, I think that discussion and generally the historic damage to local government is there to see. And I think this particular Outturn figures show some of the in numbers and commentary, some of the impact that cuts of austerity and other reasons have had on Derby City, local government, and really coming into the cabinet role here. And my name is Hardiel Dinser, Communities and Street Pride. and localities working, cabinet member, is that the cuts that have had to be made have been massive to a workforce which is dedicated, working hard, but it becomes impossible when the numbers of staff have got to be cut. We know that demand is going up. The future is not looking any brighter, and expectations are high. And this particular budget and previous budgets have shown that local government, Derby City Council, cannot continue to function in this way. The tough decisions will have to be made, and some of the tough decisions are being played out at the moment in terms of how services are being provided. Dedicated staff are doing the best job they can, but they can do only so much when there's less of them and there's less funding. And I think we've got to do what we can to shout out for Derby and to get changes made in terms of local government funding and avoid the trap of measurements being put upon us to say when we are getting things wrong, when the reality is the main thing that's wrong is that the funding is going in the wrong direction when the demand and needs are going in the opposite direction.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. And just in defence of Councillor Hassel, I don't think he's in any way, shape or form trying to defend the government's position on Derby funding. It's a terrible position that we're in, and I'm sure he agrees with us as well. Okay, then item 11, recommendations 2.1A to J. All those in favour of the recommendations? And 2.2 and 2.3 as well. Thank you, Karen. Yep. Thank you. Okay, under contract and financial procedure matters, agenda item 12. Again, I think it's going to be Alison who kicks off on this.
Thank you, Chair. This is a regular report that comes to Cabinet. There's two items in the report for this month. The first one is in around acceptance of funding. As part of the spring budget in March 2023, the government announced a £63 million support fund for swimming pool facilities, and that fund will be managed by Sport England and will allow local authorities to apply for the funding. The national pot is circa £20 million for revenue, and there is also a capital allocation of up to £40 million, and that capital investment is to improve energy efficiency to those public facilities. We're not yet known how much we will be able to be allocated if we are successful in that bid, but indications from a fact-finding questionnaire have revealed that the amount could be in excess of £1.5 million. So the Council is seeking permission to submit a funding application to accept the funding offer from Sport England on behalf of the swimming pool operators up to the value of £2 million. It's also recommended within the report to approve delegated approval to the Cabinet Member for City Centre Regeneration, Culture and Tourism and the Strategic Director for Communities in Place to agree the terms of any award of funding allocations to the relevant swimming pool operators in the city. The second part of the report is in relation to some funding for the Strategic Development Partner procurement costs. In February 2023, Cabinet approved the procurement of a Strategic Development Partner to bring forward regeneration in some key city centre sites. The Council will require commercial and legal advice to effectively conduct that procurement, and the expectation of these costs of the advice is in the region of £50,000. So approval is sought to fund these costs by an allocation for the budget risk reserve, following a review of current commitments against the previous allocation from that reserve for the Beckett-Well regeneration associated feasibility revenue costs. There's amount available which can be redirected to this particular procurement activity. Thank you.
Thank you again, Alison. And again, I think the Exec Scrutiny Board resolved to note the report. Thank you for that, Councillor Poulter. Councillor Beatfield.
Chair, if I could have a word when you've got time, please, just on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Nadine Peatfield. I'm the Cabinet Member for the City Centre, Regeneration, Culture and Tourism. I'm very happy to be here at our first Cabinet meeting. Really, really supportive of this bid for to support our swimming pool at Moorways in the glorious ward of Sinfin and Osmaston, of course. With the rising cost of living, with the cost of inflation, and of course the crisis, the energy crisis, we need to do everything we can as possible to keep that running, keep it affordable, not just for the people that are running in it, but and of which I believe, Alison, we have half of the costs are down to the council. So that cost of the energy bills is split between the council and the operators. So obviously that's going to give us a cost saving, but importantly it allows us to keep the cost to the end user down as well. And then of course there is the climate element. If we can lower the energy costs and improve the green energy and the use of the building, then that's a win-win, and it sits very well with our manifesto. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peatfield. Councillor Poulter, is it in relation to noting the report?
Yes and no. Just to highlight for you that actually the Exec Scrutiny Board did raise a query on the second bullet point in relation to the use of £50 million, £50,000 from the Budget Risk Reserve, because we queried it because obviously you don't like to use reserves, but we queried also whether it could have come out of the business rates pilot funding that's available to the city. So the answer was, in actual fact, that it's not quite as simple as that it's coming out of the Budget Risk Reserve per se. It's coming out of some unused reserves from elsewhere, i.e. Beckettwell, which Alison referred to, but I think just need to make clear for the public.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter, and I think Alison did quite clearly state that the £50,000 was being taken from the unused Beckettwell reserve. So thank you for that. A huge success Moorways Swimming Pool has been for our city. It's one of the most ambitious projects that the council has ever embarked on, and those who have been to visit the facility or use the facility, I'm sure everybody will agree with me that it has been and continues to be a huge success. Membership numbers are way exceeding what the business plan and the initial suggestions for the facility were predicted at, almost twice as much, I think, if not close to that figure. So again, Cabinet, please. Agenda item 12, recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. All those in favour? Thank you. Again, under contract and financial procedure matters, agenda item 13, Council House optimisation. John Sadler.
Thank you, Chair. My name is John Sadler, and contrary, there's been a slight title change. I'm the head of estates and property review rather than strategic asset management, but that's only a recent change. The purpose of this paper is to gain awareness and support to phase 1 of the Council House optimisations project. This project forms part of the asset rationalisation programme, which was established in the autumn of 2022 with the objective of rationalising the Council's property portfolio. Some initial work was undertaken and optimising the use of the Council House was identified as the priority. Some of the reasons behind that are set out in paragraph 4.2, but I just wish to highlight 2 of them. The first one being the move to hybrid working has reduced utilisation of the Council House, and that there's already a 2023-24 income target of 140,000 for Council House rent built into the MTFP. The focus of phase 1 is to reconfigure the first floor of the Council House, to create a working environment which supports hybrid working and allows spare desk capacity to be made available for rental by partner organisations, and also to support the achievement of the MTFP income target. It's recognised that Phase 1 will have an impact on how colleagues, members and partners usually view the Council House. Its success therefore relies on gaining buy-in from these stakeholders. This paper is an important step in socialising that proposal and gaining the support of the stakeholders prior to us entering into any medium-term legal arrangements and forging long-term plans for the building. Moving forward, the programme team will continue to focus on bringing in public sector partners and other health-related organisations who already work closely with and where we see huge potential benefits in co-locating for both parties. Some of this has been achieved, as in May of this year, a licence was granted for 30 desks to for the use of 30 desks to a public sector health partner who joined the police, DWP, Derby Homes and others who already share the Council House space with us. Initial feedback from People Services colleagues on the first floor already indicate the relocation is having operational benefit. Another important aspect of Phase 1 is addressing whether the Council House is set up optimally for hybrid working. Initial feedback is that there are barriers to collective working, including insufficient meeting space and smaller private areas which to hold Teams meetings and one-to-ones. The programme team is therefore taking some practical steps about this and is trying to look to bring back a number of meeting rooms which have already been repurposed during the pandemic, and also it's recognised that Cabinet members have agreed to the reduction in use of their Cabinet member offices. In addition, prior to taking any major steps in changing the way we use the building, we need to take stock. We're therefore issuing a survey to heads of service to seek their views, and also we need to bring external support from office planning professionals to better understand the market and range of opportunities available to us. In addition, we've sought support for the delivery of Phase 1 through the Place Pilot Scheme, of which Derby is a member. This scheme is governed through the government's One Public Estate programme, and it's seeking to bring together all public asset owners in each place, deliver a more joined-up approach for future public estate demand and supply. Therefore, bringing in public sector partners into the Council House will have a central contribution to our Place Pilot work, and we are seeking to fund that through some of the initial feasibility work through the grant, the Place Pilot grant that has already been allocated to Derby. There are risks associated with progressing around Phase 1, as Phase 1 is still seen to be largely being a vision at this early stage. There's uncertainty around the ability to secure the right partners, as well as around the extent of improvements required to the Council House. In addition, the programme board recognise that we need to be flexible in our approach, and we might need to act quickly and seize opportunities as they arise. Therefore, to help that, we're seeking the ability to work agile in making these decisions. Therefore, it's seeking the recommendations, approval to the recommendations set out in paragraph 2.1 to 2.4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that summary. Agenda item 13, there was a recommendation from the Exec Scrutiny Board. Councillor Poulter.
Thank you. Yes, whilst the Exec Scrutiny Board can endorse the actual principle of this, because they acknowledged the need to get income wherever possible, they felt that it was necessary to point out that we need to understand the extent of the issues around hybrid working and home working as well, so that we can maximise the purposes for which it was originally intended by bringing more staff back to the Council House. And I've heard yourself, I think, in recent days, or seen you express a view that that we need to look at the need to bring more people back into the Council House to optimise it. and we shouldn't. It's fine to make joint partnership arrangements with partners and in bringing them into the council house. But what a crazy situation it would be if we brought people from the health department into the council house, but the people they need to work with from the council are not actually in the council house. So we need to be careful about how we manage this and A, understand the extent of the problem, and B, how we're going to resolve it.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. I'll just bring in Councillor Khan, and then the Chief Exec would like a word as well. Councillor Khan.
Thank you. My name is Councillor Shiraz Khan, Cabinet Member for Housing, Properties and Regulatory Committees. Long list of what I've got. But on this current topic, I mean, although it was started by, the process was started by Councillor Poulter's administration, I recognise the sort of dire straits we're in terms of financial, reserves. So I welcome any initiative that brings in extra income to the council without having an impact or to the detriment of our public or staff or the services that we provide. Having limited time to study this, as I said, I'm for the proposal, but I did say to John, I think last time when he presented, he'd done the presentation to us shortly after the AGM, that perhaps we have to look at the safety and privacy and the comfort of our workers as well as councillors, and to see if we can better organise which floors and to whom we let out the desk space. Having been an advocate of face-to-face meetings and sort of working from here, I'm not going to suddenly become a hypocrite and say I totally agree with hybrid working or working from home, but sometimes it's a necessity and we have to accept that. But the only thing I would say to John again is, yes, the initiative is good, but perhaps just to go over a few things to look at the personal safety, comfort and privacy of not just the staff but the councillors and everyone else within the council house.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Paul Simpson, I'm the Chief Exec of the City Council. So I guess just a couple of points I wanted to make about this, because it is an important project for us as a council, not just in relation to the council house, but more widely, as John set out. I guess the first thing I'd say is, this question about the utilisation of the building, given what happened with the pandemic, is an important one, and I wholeheartedly support people working in a collaborative manner and using the collaborative space of the council house. So I think it's important to recognise that the way in which the council house was originally designed wouldn't necessarily fit with the way that people now work in a post-pandemic world. So I think that's an important consideration. So it will require some changes to the way in which the building was originally envisaged. And I guess the other important point in terms of the utilisation of the building, even prior to the pandemic, the council house was only ever kind of 75% occupied. So there was always surplus capacity within the building to facilitate greater use of the building. So, and the space that has been put forward in terms of the number of desks actually would have fit within the surplus capacity that existed pre-pandemic. So I think that's an important point to make. The second point I wanted to make as the Chief Executive is, because I'm conscious, this is a public meeting, the press are here, and I've been very clear that I do not want the focus just to be on this building. As important as it is, and it plays an important part in terms of obviously the collaboration, the communication of our staff, but also plays an important part in supporting the vibrancy of the city centre. So the more people we've got here is a good thing in terms of supporting businesses, etc., which is clearly a really important consideration for us as a council as well. So that point's not lost on me. But I wouldn't also want to say, or I wouldn't want to give the impression, should I say, that the staff that don't work in this building aren't important. And just to reassure the Cabinet and just to reassure members of staff who work for this organisation that it isn't just about this building, and we are looking at improving the working conditions wherever we can for all our members of staff, particularly at places like Stores Road. So I just wanted to make that point as a public statement, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's an important point to make. Councillor Swan.
Yeah, Councillor Swan here. I am the Climate, Transport and Sustainability Cabinet Member. I really support the move with regards to optimisation of the building. We are not going to go back to the days of having buildings empty anymore. When we're talking about climate change, hybrid working does support that agenda. So it's something I feel very excited about. I think the only caveat there is that, you know, that you don't move so far that people who work in the council don't feel that there's a space for them anymore. And I think you've got that, you've already outlined actually that 75% of the building was only used prior to that. So already you've got 25% that was underutilised. And I think it's a great way of bringing extra income to the, you know, into the council. But so thank you.
Councillor Dinser.
Yeah. I mean, I think the paper itself and the sort of reassurances given by the Chief Executive is the right way to go. Things have changed, and I just want to reinforce and reiterate what the Chief Executive said about council workers who are not or will not be accommodated in this building. And I'm already aware and supportive of the need to look at how Stores Road is functioning and what the conditions are for the workers, our council workers that are there. So I'm very supportive and appreciative of the need of doing something about that. And I hope that we can move that along and provide a good working facility for our workers at Stores Road.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Councillor Whitby, and then I'll bring in Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I didn't say my title before because I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I think it's children's social care, learning and skills, but I may have that wrong, but it did change. Anyway, thank you. Just to sort of build on what Councillor Swan was saying, I fully agree with the principle here that we should utilise the council house and we should generate income wherever we could. But also, you know, this is an amazing building that is almost entirely the energy, you know, produced in a green way. We've got the hydro, we've got the solar panels on the roof. So really, from a climate point of view, we should fill this to the max because it's a very, very green building, and I'd like to see that utilised from a climate point of view. Thank you.
Councillor Hassel.
Thank you, Chair. Broadly in support of optimisation of this building, it's really important, obviously for the city centre and footfall and all of those things. But I don't think we should lose sight of the importance of face-to-face working and the innovation, sort of collaboration, morale and camaraderie that comes from working together in a physical space. And I wouldn't want that to be at the detriment to the people of Derby, because this is what this building is here for. I fully appreciate the need to raise further funds by utilising it to a third party, if you want to call it that. But I would like to have some reassurance that the idea around optimisation, the primary driver, is to ensure that we are delivering for the people of Derby and that our staff are presented with the option to work in a space if they want to, but that doesn't come at a cost of sort of buffering the coffers and that sort of thing. So my question is really, is the priority about service delivery or financial gain. Thank you.
Thank you for all those contributions, and I think some important points made there. Thank you, Councillor Hassel, for your question at the end of that. Absolutely. I mean, this Cabinet has said on a number of occasions, everything we do will be putting the people of Derby first. Having this building utilised much more than it is now, whether that's council staff, whether it's staff from other public sector organisations working collaboratively in such a good facility like this will, I am sure, help provide better services across the whole public sector for our city, and that will help deliver better outcomes for our residents. I think John mentioned earlier on, the Cabinet themselves have taken made sacrifices. We're sharing, I think, 4 officers now between the 8 of us, rather than using 8 officers, so good quality executive space will be available to lease out as well. It's an important point to note the utilisation of this building prior to the pandemic as well, because it was underutilised. Hybrid working isn't something new or was alien to people working in this building, and our valued officers, a number of those where their jobs and roles allowed it, have been working flexibly for a number of years. It will have a positive impact on all or a number of public services, and it will also have a positive impact on our city centre and footfall in our city centre. And let's not forget the impact or the shortage Derby has for good grade office space in and around the city centre. So I'm going to bring this one to a conclusion. Thank you, Chris, for your Scrutiny Board's recommendations. Again, I think that's the 3rd recommendation this evening. That is actually in the report already, so obviously there's some alignment between what we're trying to do and what the Scrutiny Board would like to do, because the recommendations you're making are in the report, and likewise the recommendation you have here is in the main body of the report anyway. So that's a good sign. So item 13, Cabinet recommendations 2.1 to 2.4. All those in favour? Excellent. Thank you very much. That's carried. Item 14, under performance, the 22-23 Q4 performance monitoring report. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sarah Walker. I'm the Head of Strategy, Performance and Partnerships, and I'm going to take you through a very brief overview of the report. So the report presents a consolidated overview of our performance in line with the commitments that we made in the Council Plan 2022 to 2025, specifically focusing on the areas we'd identified for delivery over the last financial year. It has been set in the context of the 4 city themes that we have agreed through the Partnership Board of green, growth, vibrancy and resilience, alongside a local council theme of working smarter. As a report, it does bring together a summary of our priority performance measures, our priority projects, our strategic risks and also our milestones, presenting colleagues with a consolidated overview of how we are progressing against the delivery of that plan. The position is the outturns as reported to the end of March 2023. So there are some headlines set out for Cabinet colleagues in paragraph 4.7 of the report. So just to highlight a few. Of the measures where targets had been set, 72% had met or exceeded these at the end of the year, which is an improvement on the position reported at the end of March 2022, which was 65%. 73% of our priority milestones or actions were assessed as either on track or completed. It is important to note that this is a dip from the position reported in Q3 and is also below the comparable position from the previous year, perhaps reflecting some of the emerging pressures and risks we are facing, and the strategic risks are contained within the document. 67% of our priority projects that are monitored as part of the council plan were evaluated at the end of March as either green or amber green, and we have increased over the last 12 months the level of assurance activity in relation to our programmes and projects. So this is below that reported at the end of March 22, but is a reflection of the robust challenge that is taking place. At the end of March, there were a total of 15 strategic risks within our strategic risk register. So since the end of December, there have been a number of changes, and there are full details of this contained both within the covering report and also the appendix. But just to pull out the key changes, there has been one risk escalated from a directorate level to a strategic risk level relating to equal pay claims. One risk has been redefined and de-escalated to directorate level in relation to fraud. This has now been specified into both internal and external fraud. And one risk has been reclassified from an opportunity to a threat risk in relation to colleague wellbeing. And obviously there are correlations within what else is contained within the report. Key achievements over the final quarter and also the last year are presented in paragraphs 4.8 to 4.10. So in the final quarter of the year, we completed 12 of the milestones that we'd committed to within that quarter. So if I just pull out a highlight from each of the themes within the council plan, from a green perspective, we've seen an improvement in our recycling rates. It is important to note that's reported a quarter in arrears, so that's really positive performance compared to where we were previously. From a growth perspective, as an organisation, but also through our partnership activity work, we continue to support an increase in jobs in the city. We provide advice and guidance to businesses, and funding has been generated through our activities over the last year, and the specific details of the values are contained within the report. From a vibrancy perspective, we've seen really positive attendances at some of the events we've presented through Derby Live. From a resilience perspective, we've done a lot of work to maintain independence for the people of Derby in their own homes through falls prevention activities, through the work of the Healthy Housing Hub, and through the effective use of the Disabled Facilities Grant. And we've really worked to maximise the use of our internal foster carers, reducing the use of independent fostering agencies over the last 12 months. And from a working smarter perspective, we have implemented our contract management and procurement platform, which has positively impacted controls within this strategic risk, and this is one of the areas we've seen a decline in the overall threat score. So obviously, to provide a balanced view of performance and risks facing us as an organisation, but also the city, paragraphs 4.11 to 4.15 provide an overview of where milestones have seen slippage. And there is also a summary of all of the performance measures where we have not hit target, alongside a very brief summary of some supporting information in relation to those areas. There's further context within the appendix and also obviously within our performance systems. So just to flag a number of areas which have previously been identified as presenting us with challenges, we have seen an increase in the number of homelessness approaches. And in the final quarter of the year, we saw an increase, move from resolution under the prevention duty through to the relief duty. We have seen fewer of our looked after children benefiting from stable placements. What I would say is that this can be impacted by a very small number of our young people, and moves can be in line with care plans. But we have seen a reduction in stability of placements for young people that have been in their placements for 2.5 years or more, and for those young people that have been looked after for a period of time, we have seen an increase in moves for a small cohort. I will come on to recommendations in relation to that area in a moment. And despite the fact we have seen a slight decline in sickness absence to what we'd forecasted at the end of Q3, we have seen an increase comparably with our historical outturns in relation to the total number of average working days lost per FTE equivalent within the last year. So paragraphs 4.16 to 4.18 reflect some of the performance review activities that we have completed over the last quarter. So if I can just identify from recommendations 2.13 to 2.4, just to flag to Cabinet's attention, that we are recommending that 2 performance measures are put forward for consideration via a performance surgery, and they are both in relation to the stability of placements for our looked after children, which I've just highlighted, and to also note the findings of an internal audit report that was completed in relation to data quality and our performance management arrangements, both from a central perspective, but also from the perspective of data owners across the organisation who provide the updates that are presented as part of this report, but also our broader performance monitoring activity. And they found that there were substantial assurances in place, ensuring that obviously we've got that rigour. There are full details of all of the areas that we committed to as part of the Council Delivery Plan presented within Appendix 1. There are summary pages that bring out the key highlights, and we are also working to collate the annual report, which will consider areas of performance and achievement and development beyond those contained within the Council Delivery Plan.
Thank you for that, Sarah, and thanks for a very thorough summary of a very thorough report indeed. And I'm a great believer of performance monitoring is essential to drive improvements in any organisation. So thank you to you and your team for that. Councillor Poulter, there was a number of recommendations come from exec scrutiny.
Yes, thank you.
A couple of moments on that.
Yes, thank you. Exec scrutiny looked at the performance monitoring report, took stock and note of some very many positives in it, but also some red rated items, and also noted the recommendations in relation to a performance monitoring in relation to security of children's placements. So, but on top of that, there was a feeling that there were 3 particular items that warranted a closer look, and calling on the Cabinet member to look into these particular 3 items and provide action plans for their the way that they anticipate that they're going to be able to tackle the issues. The first one is in some concerns around the level of effective alcohol treatment that's been carried out in the city. There seems to be a serious reduction in that level of treatment available. The second one was in relation to rough sleeping, and bearing in mind the efforts and the funding, governmental funding, and the previous success in relation to rough sleeping, the board were concerned at the current trend in relation to rough sleeping and felt that the Cabinet member responsible would need to look at that. And the third one is a very long-standing one for this council in relation to sickness levels. One particular member of the board was new to the council. Who's new to the council was astonished by the level of sickness that we carry at the moment, because he works in local industry. I think it's maybe the same place as you, Leader, and the sickness levels are certainly different there. And he was astonished by those levels. Obviously, over various administrations have tried to tackle the issue, but it's certainly at least stagnant, if not getting worse, and it needs, and the recommendation is that there's a closer look at it and an action plan produced. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I mean, three worrying trends, which I'm sure every councillor would agree need a closer look, as you've put it. And I definitely agree with you that is the case. I think rather than just putting this to the Cabinet members to come up with an action plan in isolation, what would be really useful for me, whilst we're at the beginning of the municipal year and the beginning of indeed a 4-year electoral cycle, if I slightly change your recommendation and put it to Cabinet, that we ask the relevant scrutiny boards to consider having a topic review in these areas. I think that will give it a more thorough look. It will give it several eyes looking at it rather than one pair of eyes in the view of the Cabinet, and then it will come back for the Cabinet member once that topic review is done to consider the findings of these topic reviews. So more than happy to put that additional to the recommendations in the report. Anybody from Cabinet like to make any comments? Councillor Martin, and then Pete Field, and then Dinser.
Hello, quite belatedly, I'm Councillor Alison Martin, one of 3 Alisons in the room, who are my Cabinet responsibility is integrated health and adult care. I welcome this recommendation. This is an extremely important area of health. In some ways, it also relates to a burning concern of my own, which is obesity levels in the city, because we know that it's alcohol consumption which contributes very significantly to issues around weight control and obesity. So it's a very important area. I am aware, and I have been briefed this afternoon, having only just taken up the role. I wasn't sure exactly what happens on this. I have been briefed that there is an action plan already in place. But of course, having been scrutiny chair myself, I definitely welcome the views of my fellow councillors from the scrutiny boards to look at what is taking place and to come up with some suggestions on what is happening and how it might actually be improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's important to remind us all in the room that this report and review is up to the end of March 2023. And, you know, it's not, you know, that while there are lots of positives to reflect on, it is a worrying trend that there are more slippage and more more statuses turn into red. And notably, especially in the areas of people's health, people's education, special needs, you know, and it's obviously mental health as well, homelessness, all of these things. Obviously, there is a correlation here. You know, we are one struggling council amongst a country of struggling councils. We are one struggling city, amongst a country of struggling cities, towns and villages. And what we can see here, there is a direct correlation of a lack of funding, and then you add on top demand increasing because of all of the pressures on people's lives, including the cost of living crisis, inflation, food inflation, etc., and energy crisis. And of course, everybody that works in this council as well is under the same pressures that everybody else out there in Derby is under, and they are under increasing pressures of cuts to their departments, and many of them are doing the job of three officers used to cover, and again, the correlation between the pressures that are on our staff in this council house and the cuts that have come to the council cannot be ignored, and we just have to reflect on them and again make that plea to government to please, the majority of these problems and these pressures and these amber reds situations could be relieved. I'll leave it to that.
Thank you, Councillor Peatfield. Councillor Dinser.
Yeah, I mean, I think these reports are always very useful, very helpful, and I commend the officers who compiled this, because it's needed. It's really important to understand what's working well and what's not working well, and sort of challenge ourselves and challenge other organisations to the best we can do. There's no doubt funding cuts will have an impact on all these areas, certainly in terms of the demands made on our workforce, our council officers and staff. Has had an impact on sickness, absence, and it's something that I've been looking at when I've been on the Audit and Governance Committee previously, and sort of always wanting to see what are the causes and how can we actually try to mitigate them. And so all of these three identified by the exec scrutiny, and all the other red ranked areas are are and should be a concern for all of us. And we've all got to work together to see how we can impact on them in a positive way and sort of get it going in the right direction. This is certainly something we have to do as a cabinet. And your suggestion, Chair, of the scrutiny boards working with us to look at some of these and maybe come up with ideas which we may not have considered, and then the cabinet members and with the relevant directors and leadership on each of those areas can help to sort of use those to make a positive impact on some of the areas where performance is showing that we're not doing as well as we want to do. So I think that's really welcome, and I welcome these reports. Maybe we don't spend enough time looking at them and sort of using them to our full effect, and that's something that we probably need to look at as a cabinet more going forward, and work with Sarah and her team to do that. I had just one question on the thing. It was 4.8 Green City. It says 39.7% of household waste was recycled, composted or reused, which was 3% improvement on the previous year. Have you got any sort of benchmark? Is that a good or bad? I mean, is it sort of any way of sort of just making some sense of what it means?
I'm happy to share that information with cabinet members after the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lindsay. Thank you for that, Sarah. Councillor Poulter, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you. And just to clarify the purpose from the Executive Board's point of view was this, that obviously we could have recommended we look at all of the red rag items. That wouldn't help, because there needs to be specific focus on what the board consider were three main priorities. And the purpose of the recommendation is to get the cabinet member to take personal responsibility and involve themselves in the resolution of the problem, not to have it beaten back to the scrutiny boards themselves. And actually, I think the scrutiny chairs might have something to say in terms of being directed as to how they should conduct their scrutiny boards. So the point is, this was deliberately meant and targeted at the cabinet members involved to get them to take ownership and deal with the problem.
Thank you for that clarity, Councillor Poulter. And I'm quite enthused that you, on behalf of the scrutiny chairs, say that they, would like a say in what they do. Absolutely, they should have a say in what their topic review is, and that's why I said we recommend that they consider these items for a topic review. If they decide it doesn't warrant a topic review because they've got something else which they would think is more, or they think is more important or more relevant, then absolutely it's in their gift to do that. I remain, and I'm sure the rest of the cabinet remain, absolutely committed to try and improve all of our performance indicators. But I just think, and I know and believe, a more robust way of doing that would be to do a good, detailed topic review with those recommendations coming to the relevant cabinet members, and then collectively all 51 councillors are driving in the same direction to make sure we improve the performance of this council, which in turn will deliver better services to our city. If any particular scrutiny board decides they don't want to take one of these three or any of the other sort of red rag indicators as their topic reviews because they want to do something else, then that's entirely, they're absolutely entitled to that point of view, and they could do something differently. In that case, we'll pick these up and take ownership of them as we will any other issue within this council. But I think it's a sensible approach to ask the scrutiny chairs to consider these as topic reviews. Paul, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess just a couple of observations and acknowledging all the comments that cabinet members have made, and there have been the comments from Councillor Poulter as well. But I guess again, I'm saying this as the Chief Executive of the City Council. I think it's really important and really grateful to Sarah for her and her team for the work they've done on this. But actually, the people I want to thank more than anybody are all the council staff for achieving the results that are in this report under incredibly challenging circumstances. It is difficult working in local government right here, right now. And clearly I'm not going to get into the politics of all that, but I think I can be safe to say, as the Chief Executive, it's probably the most difficult time I've witnessed in my career, and I've been in local government for the best part of 30 years, and it is incredibly difficult to be working in local government right now. And so all I will say is we don't get everything right. We don't. And this isn't in any way a perfect score in terms of what the local authorities achieved over the last 12 months, but it is, largely, we can focus sometimes too much on the negative and the challenges that we face, and I think we have to take a broader perspective and look at, in the round, what the council has achieved over the last year. And I think yes, as I say, it's not perfect, but there's a lot to be proud of as a city council, and there's a lot for my staff to be proud of, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul, for that. Briefly, Councillor Hesselgrave.
I think we shouldn't forget that the Personnel Committee has this as part of the remit, the issue of staff attendance or absence, and they're supposed to be delving into that and coming up with stuff. So I don't think we need a plethora of different groups looking at it. We need to have a kind of unified approach. Maybe it'd be more sensible to go through personnel for that particular issue.
Thank you, Councillor Hesselgrave. Okay, so I'm going to move to a vote on the recommendations for item 14. So recommendations 2.4 to 2.1 to 2.4 as printed, with the slightly amended exec scrutiny recommendation for the relevant scrutiny boards or committees to consider a topic review on the 3 items raised by the board. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously also. Okay, moving on with business then. Item 15, there's a written resolution to exclude the press and public from this point forward. All those in favour? Thank you.